The type of screws that I like to use are Plastite. There are multiple types of screws. They're like a wood screw, but these are trilobular. So it has more efficient insertion, holding strength, and reduces the displacement and boss bursting by putting too much material in the boss. It only touches at 3 points at any given time in threads. So we said we had an M8 screw. That's a 179 right here. We're going to put a .158 diameter hole in there. And the reason that we're not going soft is it's not an elastomeric that can actually expand out of the way. It would break or put too much stress on it. So we're going to use a 158. So if I go back over here and I edit this hole, I'm going to change this to a regular hole, and I can leave this, let's see, right, and that needs to be a diameter of 0.158 times 25.4. Okay? And what is the depth? I don't want to go all the way down in here. Did it say what the depth was? When you're modeling something that goes from a top into a round feature, what should you put in there as far as the distance of the blind hole? Or the hole?
Just distance up to the next surface and choose that surface.
Sometimes that gives you a point that's at the apex and you won't blow through the whole surface. So what I like to do is I put a blind depth through to the center of that next surface. I'm going to turn my axis on and I'm going to measure that. Measure distance. So the comment was made, we should just go up to the next surface and measure it. But sometimes if you just go up to surface, it's just going to go to right here. You want that drill bit to break all the way out or that pin to go all the way a little bit further in. So I'm going to say from here to this top, when I usually design something, I go through to the center of the next circular object. It's 29 millimeters. So I'm going to change this to 29 and I'm going to regenerate. Okay, so now I have, what was the size of this again? 4.01 diameter. 0.158 times 25.4. When you're converting from inches to millimeters, you're going to multiply because there are more millimeters in an inch than one unit. Okay, so now I have this all converted to, and I'm going to go in and use a Plastite screw in here. That should be fine. So the next thing we're going to do is start the draft, and how do I get inside these features before the rounds? Humor me. How do I put the draft in here? Remember, we don't want to put the draft in right at the end because we're going to have multiple surfaces that are going to be have a problem. So I'm going to use insert mode and I'm going to drag it up here. Does that make sense to you guys? So notice that I don't have this extrusion. I'm going to go ahead and pull down to this extrusion. And where is the other extrusion? Right there. This is a pattern of holes. Okay, I'm going to resume. And I'm going to bring this round down here. So I'm going to reorder that round. Can I do that? Looks like one of the holes was placed on the center of the round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up above this round and we're going to do these for right now, and then I'm going to resume this hole and then I'll do this one. Okay, so let's do a draft. Draft. So what we were saying is that extrude 7, which is this hole, shouldn't be dependent on the rounds of the pattern. But how do you find out what its parent-child relationships are? If you go to Info and you can go to Reference Viewer, brings you up a map. There are some rounds that are suppressed that are dependent on it. And what it's dependent on is that hole, that's it, this extrusion, the top plane, and this extrusion. So you're right, it shouldn't have a problem. So if I can right click on this, I can go to Edit, Feature Operations. I want to reorder this after this. It says it can't be inserted after that, but we could probably insert it before that. The reason is that something's suppressed right after it. I think that's a problem. So let's go before this, and it inserted right up there. Now I can move Extrude 6 up above it. There's just a problem when something is suppressed right below it, it doesn't want to insert up in there. That reference viewer is great. And it would be really nice if we had the part that told us all the assemblies and the drawings that it were in. Right? What is dependent on it? Okay, so now we've got everything. We're going to go ahead and start with draft. Draft, what do y'all want to start with? Pulling with this direction.
Let's just start with the top half with the ribs and the structural support.
We're pulling in this direction, aren't we? Because it's got to pull this hole out. So this direction. Let's go ahead and set it up right. We're going to be looking at, what is that, front? Oh, we thought we were. Bottom. Shoot. Okay, let's look at this surface, and top will be this surface. Or let's make it bottom.
If we use the top reference as the right plane, would that give us pretty much this view?
Look at right here. This would be my front. Top would be what?
Choose the right plane.
Oh, the right plane is right.
No, the right. If you choose the right plane as the top plane, wouldn't it give us something looking similar like this?
Yes.
So
Okay, that makes sense to correlate. Alright, so let's start with that draft. Draft. I'm going to draft these walls. We said we're going to be what?
half a degree.
Half a degree. So I'm going to grab both sides. I'm going to make that the hinge direction and the pull direction is going to be the same. I can see that it's getting bigger, so I need to flip it. And it's going to be 0.5. Now, look what's happening down here. It's getting bigger. So this is when we need to use a split. Split by drafting hinge. If I split by object, it'll allow me to sketch in the draft, or split by the drafting hinge. So my plane is here. My individual surfaces are here. The draft hinge is also the right plane. So that's drafting out. This is drafting in. So I have to, we said they're both a half degree, right? So if they're both a half degree, I have to flip this one. Or this one. Alright? So both of these are each direction. You see how they're getting smaller both sides now? So instead of putting a negative, just flip the direction of either one. We'll say okay. I'm going to split this plane. So draft this plane. The drafting hinge is right. And we're going to split it by the draft hinge. And what did we say we're going to have? 2 degrees on each? Okay. So, knowing this order of operation, I selected this, but it doesn't tell me which one's which side. So I guess this one is the first side. Let's look and see if that's right. That's just showing us our direction. So we'll say okay. So I could draft these independently. Draft the first side only, the second side only, or dependently. That would make them equal. So if I said dependently, they would both be 2 degrees, which is good. And they would be separate. They would be each direction. So let's say okay on that one. Alright, let's split this outside here. So we're going to draft these two. Do they need to be drafted? They're not parallel to the surface, so they're perpendicular, so they need to be drafted. They'll be 2 degrees as well, right? So why not put those all in the same one? So if I go back into this draft and I edit the definition, I'm going to select some more references. So I'm going to select this, holding down Control, and this. Everything's drafting in at 2 degrees. Say okay. So it's making some weirdness down here, isn't it? Should we, alright, so should we draft, if we're having weirdness right here, sometimes you might want to draft this surface the same way you draft that one, even if it's 2 degrees. It's just a stiffening rib. So let's see what it looks like when we draft it. So let's draft this one, and we said this one. Uh-oh, forgot Control. The drafting hinge is this. It's equidistant. That's 1 degree, and we said that we were going to do this one 1/4 degree on each side. Okay, let's say okay. Now look what that did for us. Okay, let's draft this surface. Draft, Control Kim, and I could draft all these the same, or I could leave these off and draft these at a certain angle that would be less.
Those don't need to be drafted, correct?
These do not, because they're circular in this direction, so that's going to have draft because the circular element is parallel to this, so that's good. What about the other ones? So the other ones are 3/4 too, right? So let's do this all in one if we can. Gather them up. Split direction is here. Split angle, we said on these is going to be 3/4. Now let's look and see if this is drafting correctly. This is coming in. Is that what we want? And this is coming out. So we're going to flip this. This is coming out and this is coming in. Is that correct? Yeah, you're pulling away from the pin and away from the cavity of the tool. So that worked out well. Why is this not showing me this split draft? Didn't do it. So let's see if it's still selected. If I edit this, these surfaces are still selected. If it does not draft those surfaces, go in and deselect these surfaces. Okay? And then we'll put them in another draft and see if they'll make in another draft. Main thing is you just don't want a bunch of surfaces in here that aren't doing anything. So I'm going to put another draft in. So what's happening with that?
You might not understand how to, do that rib at the draft finish.
Right here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably pretty complicated.
It's a good point. So what do you guys think about that?
Some people need a drafting first.
Yeah. So it's not taking draft, this one isn't. So where is this feature? There it is. Let's try inserting here. And then putting the draft on, see if that makes. Okay? Draft these sides. And we're going to flip it. Looks good. So I could draft the inside and take the inside draft out of the other one and group these together if I wanted. Or leave it just like this. Split. Good. Split at the draft hinge. And that was supposed to be dependently, so that they're both 3/4. And go ahead and say OK. And let's see if we can resume these now. Excellent. So if I edit this, I see that that's going to the tangency, which is right on the outside of the circle where the draft is, so we're still in good shape. Lucked out with that one. So let's go to this sketch. Look at that. We used edge on the thickest part of that. Is that going to give us a problem later? Hoping there's not a void in here. So if we take this to wireframe, you guys see 2 lines there? I don't see 2 lines there, but we're going to see later on if we can get that in there. The better way to do this, just to be safe, is to delete this and to use edge on the smaller round. This is use edge. There's also an offset edge. Now I'm going to have to make these tangent. Now does this, it didn't tell us where this needed to come up here, so doesn't it need to be coincident right here? Or just tangent? Tangent would be better because that smooths it out. If I come right here to the quadrant, it's going to have not a smooth edge. Okay? Okay. I'll stop that. So I need to split this and trim this out. Remember that Pro E only likes enclosed boundaries. So I'm going to trim that out. And it should have trimmed it over here to the next entity. Sometimes when you use this trim command, it doesn't know that these are still coincident. And see how I missed that? I lost it. So I'm going to use edge on this small one again, and then I'm going to trim this out again. So sometimes trim to a corner is much better than trim using that sweep trim. See how that happened? I don't know what's going on with that, but let's go ahead and put this one back in here. Now let's use this corner trim. Select the 2 that you want to keep, and it should trim everything else. So let's say OK. And now I know I'm inside that part. If we turn this to wireframe, I don't really see any difference though. But you do see that parting line. Okay, let's go back down to the end of our draft here. And that looks okay. So let's go back to shaded view and let's go ahead and do the draft on these. These are already drafted at a split hinge, but I don't even see the hinge here because it's so slight. So we don't have any problem with that. What are we missing here that we have not drafted? Oh, look at this. It's standing proud of that surface now. So what does that tell us? What about the order of operation of this draft? Needs to come up right before this, right after this extrusion. So where is that draft? There it is. Let's see if we can move it right up here. Now look. Oh, look at that. We got some problems. We got problems here and here. So let's go back into those extrusions and see what's happening. So I'm going to edit the definition on this one and go back to the sketch. I need to have that come all the way down to here. So I'm going to project geometry or use edge on this one. Now am I going to have problems with this? Yes. Alright, but maybe it will draft it all at the same time whenever it gets down to here. Let me see. How are we going to do that then? We're going to have to put this draft in after this. Does that make any sense? No. Alright, so how are we going to do it, you guys? See what this does? You can see that that's going to go outside the edge. If I use edge on this one, uh-oh. What I want to keep, right? So what's wrong now?
Get rid of that other line.
This line right there. Very good. And we can delete that reference if we want to. Having references that aren't used are going to give you problems later on. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK on this one. Now I've got a problem. Look at that. How do we get rid of that?
I would increase the draft on that rib from 1/4 to maybe up to 2 that you're doing on the sides.
Is that part
Very good. So if we edit this and we change this to 2, to keep it uniform with the sides, it looks good. But let's edit the definition of this draft. We have to select this one too, right? It's still not going to help us.
No? Because it's crowd before.
Yeah. Now why did this one work and this one didn't? That one blended right in. This one did too.
Maybe the drafts aren't dependent.
It's because it's not split drafting. It's only going from
Yeah, I
one
would go back
side
and
of it.
draft on that rib.
Okay, good. So the hypothesis is that it's not split draft or it's not, they're both 2 degrees. Now is one drafting out, one's drafting in?
Possibly.
And we do have a split on them.
Look at that. And we're going to flip it. Right? Now it's blending the surfaces. Very good job. Excellent. Save as you go through these things. All right.